You're listening to The Outcue, a 21 News journalist perspective on a top news story.
Good afternoon. It is Friday, September 20th, and I am Assistant News Director Justin Mitchell, and this is The Outcue. And if it's Friday in the fall, it's high school football. Now, we're departing a little bit from the usual topics around here, which have already focused on solely on the newsroom, but there are other departments here. We've had videographers on, and we've had the weather guys on, but now is the time where people are watching on a Friday for their high school football teams. And with us today, we've got Brittany Bissell, sports anchor and reporter, and sports videographer Dan Pushcar to talk about everything that goes into it. You know, you see on TV all those highlights, all those clips. It's fast-paced. You get the scores. But guys, the work that goes into that is, I know Dana told me that starts in May.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So let's just jump off right there. What don't they know about everything that goes into planning for this? Dana's called it the Super Bowl every week.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because Dana and I just had a conversation yesterday where we were talking about, you know, all the games that we're going to air this Friday night. And Dana said, I already had this plan clear back in June, you know, what games we were going to be airing and, you know, what and how he wanted to line that up. So, you know, Dana starts early on this every year. It's May, it's June. We start with those high school football previews and diving into every team. So
how logistically, how do you guys pull this off? I mean, I know running a newsroom, you've got to fan out all over the place on the fly, and it's difficult, but you guys are getting to more places on a Friday night than we would get to in a normal news day, I would think.
yeah.
So how do you make that work? I mean, how many people are involved? How long do you stage, place? What do you get?
I mean, each Friday we have about 7 crews out, and that's a videographer and an intern or someone helping out with a videographer to pick out the plays and write the scripts. Luckily, a lot of our schools are within 15, 20 minutes of each other, so you can make it to 3 games in a night. Usually we had the furthest school first and hit them in order. Furthest, the middle, then the closest. So you're kind of working your way back to the newsroom to get the work done to get it on for the 11.
And I always tell like our interns and they come in to help us, like, this is going to feel very chaotic the first few weeks because we have like all these moving pieces and the goal is to put on this 21-minute show. And we really pride ourselves on covering as many games as we can. And I'm like, you know, you got all these people covering games, all these people writing scripts, everyone does it differently. But at the end of the day, it's like down to the very like last couple of minutes, somehow everybody gets everything in, all that video sent, all those scripts are in. And it's like, okay, we just go on and like take a deep breath and like make this happen.
Because you figure an average football game is what, like 2.5, 3 hours, right? So if these are starting at 7 o'clock and you're on the air at 11 and you've had to get to all of these and assimilate, I mean, you're down to the last second, right? Because those are scores that are getting online. Those are highlights on the air. Those are getting all the video ingested, writing to it, knowing what you have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dana does a lot of work back at the office all night. He's keep watching all these games, keeping up with scores, getting all of that stuff ready to go while we have all these crews out in the field. And, you know, some nights when we have like 3 different games, it's like really like you have to time that out so perfectly to make sure that you get to that last game and get back and you're able to get your stuff done in time. So it's like, yeah.
Beginning of the season is a little tougher because you do have a lot of cramping timeouts. So that first game you're at, you might have to stay a little longer than you would like to. And then you also have you're up against the clock because we have a running clock now. When you get up by 30, it's a running clock in the second half. So you have to time it. So you have to put in that extra or less time for that third game, and just in case it's in running clock when you arrive.
Now, how do you account for just dumb luck? I mean, obviously, you're not at every game the whole time. So how often is there some big thing that, oh man, we missed that, versus I can't believe we were here for that moment? I mean, how often are you kind of thinking of that, or don't you have time to think of that?
You really don't have time to think of that, and luckily it's high school football, so like you do have a lot of big plays happening majority of the time, unless you have 2 juggernauts going up against each other. I mean, you're probably going to get a play out of that, but a lot of times you're going to have a big play when you get there, or within 10, 15 minutes, there's going to be something that happens that you're like, wow, that was a good play.
And Dana kind of always really thinks through like, okay, let me put you at this game that has the potential to be really good last. Like you've got 2 undefeated teams going up against each other. Let's make sure that you're there for the end of that. So like he kind of thinks through all of that when scheduling as well.
So that plan's getting, I mean, that plan that we'd say he's got in May and June, obviously that's tweaked week to week though, because somebody could be on fire, somebody could be underperforming.
Sure, yeah. I mean, in terms of like how he schedules us to go out and cover the games, it's always like, let me see where these teams are right now, as opposed to, you know, what you may have thought going into the season. You got to account for injuries, and maybe somebody's just not having a good season like we thought, or maybe somebody's having a much better season than we thought. So, yeah.
And then doing these previews helps a lot because we're out there talking to these coaches. You sort of get a feel for what the team's going to be like that year. They sort of give you a feel. It'll, you know what I mean? You could see them practicing. You could see, you know, who's better than other teams. So they're going out early and doing the previews helps a lot.
And do they generally level with you? I mean, like, does a coach ever tell you, like, oh, geez, this is going to be a rough year? Or does everybody think this is their year no matter what?
Well, some of them might tell you that off record.
Yeah, but it helps for the planning, right?
yeah, absolutely. And I think it all helps too, because like with Dan and myself and Dana, I think that we've all been around for a while, so we're kind of following these teams year in and year out, and we all kind of have a good idea too of like which teams are going to be your better teams and things of that nature. And then, but you never know. Like some teams have some kids come up that are really good, and they come onto the scene, and like, hey, it's like, hey, look out for this team. They're here, you know.
Yeah, and you still have those teams that are maybe overlooking an opponent, or maybe they just they had a bad practice week, and it ends up, you know, there's an upset there. So yeah, I mean, there's stuff you can't plan for.
Well, so along those lines, just logistically, any one game, you know, there's hundreds and hundreds of people. You've got to cut in and out of these crowds. I mean, are people, what do you guys run into there? How do you get in and out? Are people trying to talk to you and whatnot? And you got, I mean, what do you run into?
You do have the occasional fan or whatever. Well, you call them super fans. You see them at, you know, the same games, same people you see at, you know, Springfield, Poland, you know, Canfield. They just, you know, they come up and walk up to you, and sometimes you could sit there and talk to them for a minute or two, and other times you're like, hey, gotta go, you know. But luckily, these schools know. Majority of them know who we are, so that we get pretty much front row parking. They sort of wave us in with the emergency vehicles or by the buses, which are pretty close every time. So we're pretty close to the exit, so we can get in and get out without any big hiccups.
I think that my toughest thing sometimes is because I do a live shot at 6 that I run on my own, and that atmosphere is crazy, you know, because you've got the loudspeakers going with music blaring, you've got the band playing, I'm standing down on like the end zone, so you got the team out there practicing before the game, footballs are flying towards your head, you know, and it's like, I'm just waiting for the day that I get smacked in the head with a football. I mean, surely everyone's gonna find it funny, but you know, but you get a lot of people that come up and want to talk, and I'm always like, I'm like, two minutes from going live, like I can't talk right now. You know, I've had that happen on numerous occasions. So I feel like that is usually my toughest battle.
Well, they don't realize when you're standing there and it's just you and a camera, they don't know that little backpack there.
Right.
You know, they don't know what that does. And so it's just, oh, she's taping something for later, right? They have no idea you're about to be on television if you don't walk away.
Yeah, sure. It piques people's interest. They want to come over and find out what you're doing. But it's like when you hear that 15 seconds in your ear, you're like, no, like I got to lock in. Yeah. So it's always like, you know, trying to get away from that.
So do you guys have any just take them behind the scenes with something funny or something crazy that's ever happened? Just tell any stories that they wouldn't know that you guys have had to deal with.
There's a couple. There's a coach around the area where, like, sometimes if you show up at the game and say, "Hey, I need a touchdown," he'll tell you what the play is, so you can be tight on it, and it'll go for 60 or 70 yards and score a touchdown.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd have to think about that to see if I could come up with something.
I mean, I'd say, yeah, it's no pressure, but I know sometimes it's just like we have those stories where you're out in the field and you've dealt with something and you're like, man, what the audience at home doesn't know, I just dealt with to get that. If a coach can run up a play that can guarantee a touchdown, then why isn't that always the play?
Sometimes you want to keep it top secret and use it against sometime when you need it, if you're in a tough game or whatever. But sometimes they'll throw us a bone every now and again. Yeah. And say, hey, I need some plays. Can you give me some plays? And they're like, yeah, sure.
That's their nuclear bomb up their sleeve they can use.
Yeah.
I would say one of the funny things too about being being a photographer on the sidelines too is you get those plays where the offense is coming from this end down to this end. They might take something like 80 yards to the house and you're standing clear down here shooting. Next thing you know, this whole stampede of players comes running down and you're just trying to lock in there and not get run over. So like you really have to like hang in there because you want to have that touchdown. It's obviously an amazing play and highlight. So like we've and you know Corey McRae obviously has gotten like taken out on the sideline before.
I forgot about that. That was
yeah. So that's one of those things where it's like, yeah, you kind of really have to hang in there and like to get that play.
And to that point, that's something that people definitely don't think about. The level of situational awareness in a moment like that is, you know, it's just, oh yeah, you're shooting a game. You're basically in the game.
Yeah.
Trying to shoot the game and not get, I mean, it's like when you see like refs, you know, trying not to get hit while they got to be right up on something. You know, you guys have expensive gear and, you know, your life and limb and need to not get hurt.
Yeah, and you're kind of blocked because the camera's on your right side. So you're kind of blocked out of everything that's happening on the right side. So you kind of got to listen. If you start hearing footsteps and everything, you got to kind of be aware of what's going on and hear footsteps or hear players coming towards you. Sometimes they're talking as they're running, you know, hey, heads up, or I got this, or
yeah,
you know what I mean? So you got to be aware of what's going on at all times. And yeah, sometimes you get hit here and there.
Yeah, you can feel it coming.
But without ever losing focus of what you're doing too. Right. You know, you've got to stay a pro right up to that second where you're at some significant personal risk.
Well, the good thing is too, is like with us having our interns out with us, they're usually, Dana always tells them, like, if you think that like he or she is about to get hit, like grab her and pull her. And I'm always like, don't pull me unless I'm absolutely about to get killed because I want to get this shot. Like, I want to get this play. So like, unless you really think I'm about to be taken out, like leave me there.
It does feel good when they're coming at you and you know you're like close to it, but you're just out of the way and you get the catch or whatever, they go out of bounds right at your feet. And you're like, this is as close as I can be.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so cool, yeah.
Now the interns, how many interns do you guys use for this? I mean, I see people barreling into the newsroom who sometimes they're familiar faces I haven't seen in forever, and sometimes they're people who I just go, I hope I let somebody in the newsroom who's allowed to be here. You know, they just start pouring in.
Yeah.
Usually we have 6 or 7, but sometimes we're short. I mean, everybody has stuff going on the weekends.
Yeah, sure.
So sometimes we're short, but it's usually the same amount of videographers we have in the field, which is 7.
And so, and to that end, so the videographers, you know, obviously we're talking to you, but there's also guys who are working double shifts, who are working news all day long, and then they might take a little break. Sometimes they don't take a little break, and then they're helping, you know, out and going to different games. And the interns, we see, like I said, sometimes familiar faces. I mean, they keep coming back for this, so there's obviously something that that gets the blood pumping that they like. They're not walking away in tears.
We have a lot of interns that come back and keep helping us year after year. I just think it's Friday night football. Everybody loves it. We have great football around here. It's so fun to be a part of what we do. It's like an adrenaline rush every Friday to get the show on air. So yeah, I think everyone enjoys being a part of it.
I feel like Joey Mamounis was here for a decade and a half.
He's my helper on Friday. He and I cover Canfield just about every Friday. So, you know, because he's a Canfield grad. So. Yeah. Yeah, so
it's just exciting when you get to see, sometimes you see a play that you might, I mean, a tip pass that gets intercepted or, you know, I mean, I remember one I caught a couple of years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago down in Beaver Local. A lineman went up with one hand, blocked the pass, caught it with his one hand and ran it in the end zone. How often are you going to see that? You know, you see that once and you're hooked. You're like, all right, I got to see the next best one.
And then we get players too that are just, you know, you get some players around here, D1 players like, you know, Lynn Bowden at Warren Harding or Brock Lowry from Canfield. Like I had the honor of covering some of those guys. And like, that's just like, you never forget that, like seeing a player at that level that just kind of stands out above everyone else. Like I still like, you know, how long ago was Lynn Bowden in high school? And I'll still tell like all the interns that come in, like, you got to look up his highlights. This kid was unreal. Like,
and so, and you know what, I skipped the part when I introduced you guys is to just asking you how long you've been doing this. Cause you both, I lose track of the years. Everything feels like it's roughly either 2 years or 20 to me. So tell them a little bit about how long you've been doing this and how much you've learned since from when you started to now.
Well, for me, I got hired here the first time back in 2015, straight out of college. had no idea what I was doing, but Dana brought me on, and I spent about 3 years here. And I did leave for a little while. I did news for a while and some public relations, and I came back about 2 years ago. But, you know, from then until now, I think that I've grown tremendously. Dan likes to pull up my very first time that I covered. I think it was in 2015 or 16, a high school football state championship, which was Farrell, and he likes to make fun of me. So it's really, it's really like one of those moments where it was like, this is where I started and this is where I am now.
Was it just green, or was it like, was there something particular?
It's not much different from how she is now.
I always say that like when I first started, my voice kind of sounded like the nerves were like in Mariah Carey range. So I think that it was just like a lot of that. And also I wore this like super hideous like lime green construction coat because I actually didn't realize that I was going to be, I was super new at this. No idea that I was going to be doing a post-game wrap-up and all of that. And so I had this hideous coat on, and I'm like giving this post-game report with this squeaky voice, and it was just the funniest thing ever. But I think it serves as a good reminder of like the growth that you make over the years. Yeah,
your little benchmarks.
Yeah.
So then, Dan, I mean, you've been, what, a long time here.
13 years next month.
Okay,
so I did almost 3 years overnights, and then the sports photographer moved over to news, and I moved over in sports 10 years ago now. And I've been doing it ever since. I love it. I mean, there's nothing.
Yeah.
I shoot soccer, football, basketball, like all the sports. No one's ever upset when you show up for a sports event. So
that's true. Yeah, you guys show up and people are happy. I get on the phone and oh Jesus, this guy.
Yeah, and that's such a good point. Like the couple years that I spent working in news, I was like, oh my goodness, please take me back to sports because
sometimes people hate you in news.
Yeah, it's so different. There's never a bad day of working in sports. Like it's honestly like when you're sitting there on the sidelines waiting to go live, you kind of have to like have that pinch me moment because this is like what you dreamed of, like being in that atmosphere out there, like waiting to go live and cover a game. It's super cool.
It is kind of weird though, like what was it, Canfield, like 3 years ago, the baseball team that made it to the regional finals, I believe. And I remember covering that Canfield team as a Little League baseball team when they made the push to go to Williamsport. And I'm like, these are the same kids I covered. And it's not that long, they were 12 at that time, and then they were 6 years. But it's weird when you see them, they were little kids and now they're adults. But I did get to cover a lot of athletes that I now see on Sundays, some in NBA. It's neat seeing not just from the area, but teams that were playing these athletes in playoffs or state championships. It's cool to see them. Okay, I knew that guy was going to make it to the NFL, or I knew that guy was going to make it to the NBA, and now they're there.
Yeah, that just breadth of experience. You were going to say something?
Oh no.
It looked like I interrupted you. I didn't mean to.
No.
So. Now, I mean, what do you guys got coming up this week? Or just, and I guess that's it. What do you got coming up for the rest of the week?
We have 19 games on the slate this Friday. I'm doing 3. I don't know, you have 3 too. You got the Columbiana County route. So Dan's going far. So he has to really like time out everything he's doing this Friday. Really good. But yeah, it's going to be fun. We've got a lot of really good games this Friday. We got Ursuline Harding. We got Struthers South Range. Actually, Valley Christian and East Palestine should be good too. So we have some good games on the slate for sure.
I got those 3 games Friday, and then Saturday we're going to Pitt to cover YSU Pitt. And then after that, it just starts all over again.
And the hours are fairly punishing sometimes, right? I mean, these things can go right down to the wire, and like you just mentioned, then you got the college game on Saturday.
Yeah, sometimes, I mean, you're really pushing it. There's a couple of times, I mean, you're nervous, but you're in contact with Dana, usually back at the station, like, hey, give me got to get out of here at this point in time. I mean, there's been triple overtime games where you're like, this is such a good game, I got to stay, we got to stay. And then, you sort of get a little leeway here and there. But, yeah, sometimes you're cutting it. We're sending it back 5 minutes before it airs, especially the YSU games. I mean, now that the 2 o'clock starts and everything, we're sending stuff back right before it.
Well, yeah, that's another thing I don't think people realize at home is that, like, usually you guys, anything that's shot out in the field, whether it's news or sports, ideally you're shooting it, you're bringing it back, but not when you're under the gun. That can be fed back from the field, and it's got to be done. Somebody's got to be going through that the whole time. So, yeah, I mean, when you guys are out in the field, somebody's back here cutting it in real time.
Yeah, and especially once we get to the playoffs, because some of these games now, the first 2 rounds, the home team hosts, so they could be a game in Cleveland, you know what I mean, that we're shooting, and we can't make it back in enough time, so we have to send it back. And if that game runs over, then you're running into all that problem there. But it was a little more hectic when I first started. We were editing on tape, and the kickoff were at 7:30, so
Yeah.
there was 1/2 hour less and more time. You needed more time to edit, so it seemed it's better now. The kickoffs are at 7, but it's still pretty hectic.
And what's Dana's demeanor like in those moments? I mean, look, Dana, I don't think that's any secret that like when he gets his game face on, he's up to here, right? So what's those calls when you're saying I need a few more minutes? What's that like?
He'll say, okay, you got to be up by this time, but he is laser focused on Fridays. I mean, he knows exactly how the plan goes, and he knows plans A, B, and C. If A doesn't work out, he knows B and C. He's prepared.
And sometimes he's like, okay, like let's say you have these 3 games, and now that second game you left, he's watching, he's keeping track of everything, and he's seeing that's coming down to the wire. He might call another photographer and be like, okay, now you got to swing to that game to get the ending of it, because they already left and they're at a different game. So like he's keeping track of like all of how games are shaking out, and because we want to get those great endings and things of that nature. So it's like he's really watching all of that.
He has said to me before that every Friday during football season is like election night, is the way to compare it, which I can understand that, because that's what you're describing is exactly what I'm thinking about on election night, where there's crews figuring out where the winning candidate is, the losing candidate, who do you need a soundbite from, when are the returns coming in, we've got 15 minutes until air, but we think we can go get this one right here if we really rush, and that kind of thing. We can at least get Zooms with people sometimes, though. You can't really Zoom into a game.
No, luckily we do have YSN Live. They do cover a lot of the local games, so we can listen, sometimes watch. But it all happens in 4 hours. I mean, it's all over and done after 4 hours. You're okay, that's it. It's over and done with.
And you just take like the biggest, sigh of relief. And like, how did we make all that happen again? Especially like week 1, like I feel like that one's always, because typically you have like some new people coming in and doing this for the first time. So like that always feels like the most stressful week until everyone kind of like understands the flow of it. But like I said, I always tell everyone like coming in for the first time, this is going to feel really chaotic, but it's all going to get done.
They adapt okay? I mean, obviously it's a lot.
Yeah, it takes a week. The biggest hiccup, the biggest wrench could be thrown in. Week 2, we had rain and thunderstorms and all that stuff. So your first game might have got delayed 30 minutes, but your second one's going on because it's 15 miles away, and they didn't see any of it. So you have to. It was week 2. It was week 2, wasn't it?
Yeah,
week 2 was hectic, because it was like, okay, that game's delayed, so go to your second game, and then go back to the first game, and then go. It was all over the place.
Actually.
Week 3, yeah.
Yeah.
And since all that's planned by distance, having to change that out at all really is like almost an unraveling that you have to somehow manage to keep on track.
Yeah, we cut it pretty close, I think, that day. Scripts were coming up there last minute, and it was close.
Yeah. And I think that's like a fun part of like the adrenaline rush of it all for like Dana and I especially too, is like, we have 19 games and we get up there and we're seeing these highlights and these scripts for the first time. So it's just like, it's like that element of surprise. And like I said, that adrenaline rush, it's like, okay, like everything's here, and now the lights come on and let's do it,
Anything we haven't touched on that you just want to make sure people at home know about this that we haven't talked about?
I think the biggest thing, and like Dana, like we just really pride ourselves on covering as many teams as we can. Like, and I think that people really appreciate that. Like, they love that we get out there and try to cover everyone and get to as many games as we can. And, like Dana always says, high school football is our bread and butter. So we love to go out and do it and bring everyone that show, you know what I mean, every Friday night. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's still the #1 sport in the area. I know baseball's pretty big, softball's pretty big too, but you still see the crowds on Friday night when you see at 7 o'clock when kickoff is. I mean, I bet last week on Thursday night, the East Liverpool Beaver local game, that was one of the biggest crowds I've seen this year so far. I mean, it looked packed.
Yeah, people are like, I mean, it's like a religion to them. I mean, they remember when they like, especially if like there's a dad or a grandpa that played, and now it's like a family tradition and whatnot. I mean, they're rabid. Sometimes.
Well, you have those family names that come through at these schools, and you're like, oh, this is the fourth one that came through, or this is so-and-so's son, or this is so-and-so's grandson. And you're like, oh, I know exactly who it is.
Or somebody will be like, I remember where I was on this day when so-and-so caught this pass and like somebody beat this, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, it's such a big deal in our area. You know, everybody really loves it.
It is. And I think they all do really appreciate the hard work that you guys do. And I hope that this gives them more of an understanding of exactly all that goes into it, because obviously you guys are having a lot of fun doing it, but you're working real hard.
Yeah.
And I hope that they appreciate that. And I think they do. With that, we'll see you next week. If there's ever any news tips you need to get us, as always, I'll tell you it's news@wfmj.com, 330-744-8821, watchdog@wfmj.com, and also sports@wfmj.com if there's anything that you want to just thank them for. Until next week, this has been the Outcue.